See, it's stuff like this that gives me trust issues.
Welcome to the Trust Issues podcast. We have trust issues with the traditional society-dictated path, with the status quo, with the whole get an education, land a job, and work tirelessly until you're 6 feet under. It's time to upgrade your life with the help of us. I'm Erica.
And I'm Kyle Auckland. We're a husband and wife duo, but we're also entrepreneurs, biohackers, and business builders.
Every week, we're dedicated to having purposeful conversations with each other and leading experts on topics like wellness, relationships, and entrepreneurship.
Subscribe to Trust Issues Podcast if you're looking for bold topics, honest dialogue, and valuable lessons.
Welcome back to another episode of the Trust Issues Podcast. If you follow us on Instagram, if you know us at all, you know that we're super into nutrition, health, and wellness. And we've shared our journey along the years on how we have transitioned from maybe doing a lot of things that society does to questioning those norms and healing our bodies in natural ways. And one of the biggest pivotal moments for me was when I picked up a book called How to Heal Your Metabolism by Kate Deering. I picked it up in 2020 and it rocked my world. Not only did it rock my world in terms of what I had believed to be true about carbs, about protein, about vegetables, about what to eat, but it really helped me create new habits that helped me have food freedom for the first time in my life. So we knew we had to bring author and expert Kate Deering on to the show. She is the author of the book that I just mentioned, and for over 25 years, she has been involved in the health and fitness industry, helping men and women of all ages achieve optimal health and wellness. Her practice is based on a holistic approach to health and wellness by looking at the entirety of a person's well-being, including their diet, their stress, their exercise, their posture, their sleep, digestion, hormones, mindset, and lifestyle. Kate is a certified exercise coach, a holistic lifestyle coach, an Olympic lifting coach, and a Z-Health practitioner in neurology and a certified nutritional consultant. Today we dove in with her and we talked about sugar.
We touched on it all.
Carbohydrates. We talked about the carnivore diet, keto. We went there and it's such a juicy conversation. We know you're going to love it. You're going to love Kate. She is such a genuine person, and just her work that she's doing in the world, we feel like people need to hear more of.
Yes.
So let's dive into this episode with Kate. All right. Welcome, Kate Deering, to the Trust Issues Podcast. We're so excited to have you today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Super excited to be here.
So I wanted to just touch on my personal experience with you, and that I really believe that when I read your book, my entire life changed. We're going to get into what your book is all about and what is in the book, but I had been, and Kyle and I both had been on this journey. We were talking about this a little bit before we were recording, of just trying all the things, eating all the ways that the world tells you in terms of what is healthy. You know, we were paleo, we were keto, we were low carb. We did all of that stuff. And really, I feel like when I found your book and when we changed how we were living, because I think it's so much more than just diet. I think it's lifestyle. I think it's like finding safety in your body. It's like giving your body what it needs. It changed our whole life. And I feel like the work that you're doing is just absolutely phenomenal, and it is life-changing. And every single person that I talk to about nutrition, I tell them throw away every single nutrition book and just read How to Heal Your Metabolism. It is the number one book that I recommend. So I just want to get into a little bit of your backstory, because I think your backstory is so fascinating, and it's also something that so many women and men can resonate with. Mm-hmm. And I'd love for you to just dive into who was Kate before who you are now, and what led you to this work and really reframing how you do life and how you nourish your body.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've had a very long journey with fitness. So I have degrees in exercise physiology and psychology. I worked in the gym business for years, running health clubs. I've been a trainer. I've been a boot camp instructor. And it was always about maximizing my fitness. I had a very type A, strong personality that I would be willing to do whatever. I just wanted to maximize. And I always thought that everything I was doing was to try to be healthy, right? And to me, health always equated was to be lean, fit, run as fast as I could, do everything to this extreme level, and because that's just how my mind worked. And that stopped working for me eventually. And I kind of hit a brick wall in my late 30s, and I was just kind of like, what the hell is going on? And usually with this kind of personality, you just try harder. You get more extreme. as the diet gets more cleaner or less carbs or whatever you try to do. And what was happening, and probably what you guys experience, is it actually became harder and harder, and you started to feel worse and worse. And I started to get fatigued, and I started having sleep issues, and it was just like, well, maybe this is just what 40 feels like, right? And this kind of sucks. And I thought I was going to be able to beat it because I was so healthy. And that's when I had this, well, that's when I got into the work of Dr. Ray Peat, and I started to look at health a little bit differently. And I had to reevaluate every belief I had around health and fitness, because I was defining it in a way that fit, you know, everything I was doing. And I think we all do that. We make choices to fit our perception of what something is. And when our perception shifts, then we have to start making different decisions. And we're like, oh my God, every decision I'm making is actually taking me away from health and not towards it. And so all these extreme beliefs I had, to work harder, to eat less carbs, to push and push and push, were now working against me. And so I had to try to understand, like, you know, what is metabolism? If we define metabolism as health, what does that even look like? And to me, and what I found was, well, it's a warm body, and it's, you know, being able to sleep deeply, and it's having good bowel movements, and it's having healthy skin and hair, and it's the ability to be able to maintain muscle mass without having to work to these extremes or diet to these extremes. And when I realized all that, I had to completely change how I was eating, how I was living, how I was training. And through it all, what eventually I found out was it's a lot easier than I was making it. And I didn't have to do all these things. And of course, you realize that about life. When you start to go with the flow and you find that way, life becomes a lot easier. And that's kind of how this diet supported me, and probably you too.
Absolutely, it did. Okay, so, you know, what is metabolism? Because I think everyone, and what you said, can you just like expand on that? Because you said healthy bowel movements, healthy skin and hair, because I think all people think is metabolism is weight loss.
Yes.
And when I started diving into healing, and whenever I mention the title of your book, which is, again, I cannot plug this book enough because it will completely change your mindset around how you've probably been living and eating. And whenever I mention the title, How to Heal Your Metabolism, people automatically think, oh, I'm just going to lose weight. But can you go a little bit more granular on what, when you said the temperature, body temperature, that's one of the first ways that I learned where is my metabolism at? Actually taking my temps in the morning upon waking up, pulses. Can you break that down a little bit more, and how someone who is listening can figure out where is my metabolism at right now?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I think there is a big misconception, because people just think I'm going to increase my metabolism, I'm going to burn more calories, right? And so metabolism is how well your body converts food into energy. And so our food, we have to convert it, right? We can't use the energy in food, which is calories, into energy, right? We can't use it directly. We have to, our body, our mechanisms, our cells have to convert that food into energy. And that's the energy that we produce that we use to run our system. And so if somebody has a low metabolism, it just means that their ability to turn food into energy is inefficient. It's not good, right? And that can come with, they might be eating enough, but maybe their body just has some sort of blocks that inhibit it from producing the energy, or they're not eating enough, or they're doing too many things that are using the fuel, right? And that's another thought process, is that your body requires a good amount of energy to run it by doing absolutely nothing. We refer to that as your basal metabolic rate. And that's just for you to lay there and do absolutely nothing. You utilize about 60 to 7% of your calories just to run your system. And that's to run your digestion, your hormone function, your brain, your nervous system, to maintain your muscles and your skeletal system. That all requires energy. Like, we don't run on air, and the cells are constantly using it. There's never a time it's like, nope, we're not using any. We're constantly using energy. And so if you don't give your body enough, then your body goes through adaptations. And it basically says, well, if you're not giving me enough fuel, yes, we can use some of your stored energy, fat or breaking down muscle. But at the same time, because we want to conserve your life, and we don't want to put you into a place where you're going to have to burn all your muscle tissue, we'll adapt and we'll slow things down. And so what you start to see is, when people start going to that hypometabolic state, is their systems aren't being properly fueled. So they have poor digestion, they have poor hormonal function, they can't maintain muscle mass, or they can't put on muscle mass. They sleep poorly, their body temperature starts dropping, right? So temperature is a product of you burning fuel. So when you burn fuel well, you are warmer because you produce heat. if you're not producing enough heat, and you can see that in your body temperature, then we understand that your metabolism is not running optimally. And so I think it's like for every degree Celsius, you burn an additional like 200-300 calories. So if you're optimal, right, then we understand you're not burning enough. You're not burning your optimizing amount of calories. And so people are just like, well, I just want to take this pill and then my metabolism will increase. And it just doesn't work that way. You have to teach your body, right? And for some people, and it's not a straightforward, sometimes it's eating straightforward path. Sometimes it's eating the right foods, but sometimes it's taking stresses out of your system. Sometimes it's, learning to kind of take things off your plate. There's a lot of different things that you can possibly do to increase that process. And so that's where it can become a challenge to some people, that kind of what is the route to get there.
So good.
Yeah, and I think that's like a lot of people just feel the overwhelm, of where do I start? Where do I start? We'll get to that, but there is on your website, there is a quote, and it says, you have to get healthy to lose weight, not lose weight to get healthy. And I think this is such a powerful question by Diane Schwarben, and that's like where I just want to start with the weight loss conversation, because I think that we have such a weight loss obsessed world, which obviously, higher weight is an issue that our society is dealing with as well, for so many reasons. But, when you talk about metabolism, when you talk about weight loss, I think that this is a conversation most people aren't having, is why I think your work is so powerful, because you're saying in order to actually get to an ideal body weight, you're going to have to get healthy. And maybe your body's holding on to calories, or your body's holding on to weight in order to just, it's in survival mode or whatever. And I noticed that, and this is my personal story. My personal story was that I felt like I just could not lose weight to save my life. And I was just sitting at this inflamed, puffy state. And then I had my son, my baby, which I actually had the most phenomenal pregnancy, because I found your work before I got pregnant, when I was like kind of preparing my body for pregnancy. But then afterwards, during postpartum, that's a whole nother thing your body goes through. I held on to a ton of weight. And I feel like what has allowed me to get rid of that weight and to naturally lose it is just like allowing my body to rest, allowing my body to heal, giving my body the nutrients it needs, instead of focusing on weight loss, especially I think in the world of postpartum women who are trying to bounce back. There's so much conversation around just, how did you get the baby weight off? How'd you get the baby weight off? So I would love for you to talk about weight loss as it pertains to what you teach, because such a hot topic.
Yes.
It certainly is, and it is something that everyone wants to address. And I usually tell people when they kind of come into this process or this kind of work, it's, we have to refocus what we're trying to do, and heal first before we even address. Now, some people get into this and they can go through the process and they will automatically lose weight because maybe they've cleaned their gut up, and that alone is going to help them. But a lot of people just kind of stabilize or possibly even put on a little weight because their body's trying to readapt to an increased calorie intake. And so where you get into problems here is a lot of people go, maybe they're coming off of a low calorie diet or a low carb diet, and their body does not utilize carbohydrates very well. And they find this approach and they jump in, and all of a sudden they're eating, from 50 carbs to 200, 250 carbs, and their body just puts on a ton of weight. So you got to move into this process slowly, and understanding where you're starting is important, because especially with carbohydrate intake, you need to move slowly so your body adapts to that. But we got to get the body in a healthy place. So if you're coming into this and you have very low body temperature, you're not sleeping well, your cycle's dysregulated, you have no libido, all of these things are happening, then we need to assess what is going on here, right? We can understand that your body is having trouble producing energy because there's not enough energy to run your system, right? And so your whole body, again, I have to tell you, your body runs on fuel and oxygen, nutrients. It doesn't run on thin air. And so, yes, if you have a significant amount of body fat on you, and I think most people says, well, I'll just let it run on that. Well, it can utilize fat on your body as fuel. But when it starts doing that, it will immediately start downregulating metabolism. So that's why people will always struggle, especially if they go into incredibly low calorie deficits, and they'll hit walls where their body just will not budge any longer because your body is adapting to this very, very low calorie intake. And if you're already having symptoms and you try to put yourself into this, major deficit, usually what happens is you'll lose some weight, but usually your symptoms will either get worse, and you just stop feeling well, and then you hit walls, and then you start binging and so forth. So you want to go into it like in a strategic process, and we want to focus on improving symptoms first, like getting you sleeping, right? We already know if you sleep better, your ability to burn body fat and use fat greatly increases.
Wow.
So that's always someplace where I like to work. And then always improving digestion, because if you have poor digestion, most likely you're going to have some sort of bacterial overload. Maybe it's going up into your small intestine or so forth. And those bacteria will produce their own toxins. We've heard of the word endotoxin. So they produce these toxins that go into your intestinal walls. And if you get stressed, they leak out of your intestines into your blood system. And when you have high amount of endotoxins in your blood, they will inhibit cellular respiration or your metabolism, right? And they can cause all sorts of havoc on your system. And I always tell people this is one reason why keto or carnivore type diets really work, because they actually lower the endotoxin load in your digestive system, taking that poison out of your body. And that alone will help you utilize energy better, right? Is it ideal to be utilizing these other resources as fuel? Not long term. They can be used as a therapeutic. I definitely think you can use those as a therapeutic diet. But long term, I think they have adverse reactions, because usually you're going to create some sort of hypothyroid state over time. So,
Wow.
So again, we want to make sure that we're looking at parameters like increased body temperature, because then we know you're producing more heat. Your pulse will increase. You want to improve your digestion, also hormonal function, right? We want to make sure you're having a good period. We want to make sure you have a libido. Those things, because all those require energy. And for women, they've always been told that your cycle is your fifth vital sign. And so if it sucks, then we know that, again, you're having an energy production issue. And so we've got to focus on that, try to heal that system and get things running optimally. And then when you're optimizing the amount of calories that you're turning into energy, then we can go, okay, now your body is in a healthy place. So at that point in time, we can maybe put a calorie deficit on you, or change your training program. Or at that point, if things are starting to work better, the weight can just start coming off even at a higher calorie intake.
That's like ideal, right? If being able to eat more and lose weight,
Everyone's
dream, And I'm like, as you're talking, I'm looking at your skin, Kate. I'm like, your skin is so glowy. You have amazing skin. I'm like obsessed with skin. So I'm like, your skin looks so good.
I will plug
Tell
saturated I will plug saturated face lotion all the time, because I have used that like ever since they brought it out. I have Kitty send me 2 bottles every time I order it, and I'm like, that stuff works so well, and it's
oh my gosh, I love Kitty
for your skin. That's a little Kitty plug.
We will plug Kitty's skincare line in the show notes, because your skin literally looks insane. I'm like watching. I'm like, but also it's what you're doing, right? It's the internal
natural
stuff,
byproduct.
It's like obviously that works, and only so much topicals can mask what's going on inside.
That will, and I will tell you, there are things that I do. I am adamant about eating beef liver every week. Like, I just eat it. I don't love it, but I eat it, and the amount of vitamin A in there, B vitamins, copper, all of those are going to help your skin. Plus, I eat oysters regularly, and the zinc are all going to help your skin. So lots and lots of nutrients are going to be amazing for your skin. Look, your skin is not something that, like, good skin or even good hair is not something your body really cares about. You don't need it, right? You can have really crappy skin and really bad hair, and your body can still survive. You can have bad digestion, a crappy period, all of these things, your body will still survive, right? You need energy for your brain, your heart, your lungs. Those are vital. These other things happen when you're in good health, right? Because now your body has enough energy to produce good hair and have nice skin and to have a good bowel movement. So that's why when we look at a body and we see all these symptoms, right, and go, well, these things occur when the body can produce enough energy. Then there's enough for all these other functions. If there's not, that's where you start seeing these breaks. And so if we can work on improving all that, and if all these other symptoms improve, I know eventually that your body will get to a place where it can have healthy weight loss. And getting back to that, like, what you don't really want, you don't want to stress the crap out of yourself to lose weight. And that's 99.9% of dietary programs, right? Let's just stress the shit out of you. And you will lose weight, right? So That usually means massive calorie deficits, over exercise. And, to be honest, that totally can work when you're in your 20s and 30s, quite effectively. And you can get away with it. Usually it's very short lived, and, you eventually have to get on another program, because usually when you put your body under those kind of severe stress, it's not sustainable, right? Going to a severe calorie deficit, not sustainable. Massive exercise programs, not sustainable. So whatever approach you do needs to be sustainable, or it's not going to work, right? It might work short term, but it's not going to work long term. And usually if you put yourself under those severe amount of stress to get this result, it's going to probably do some sort of damage. And that's going to result in some level of adaptation. And maybe the first time you do it, it's very minor. But if you do it 10, 20, 30 times over your lifetime, by the time you get to my age, a lot of women have 30, 40, 50 pounds on them because of all the dieting and rebounds they've done. And then they've gone into the severe metabolic damage. Now they're having all sorts of hormonal issues. They don't, utilize glucose very well. And then they're told to get on all these crazy low carb diets and, hormone replacement therapies and all of these things to try to help them. But what we got to look at and look, your system is just not optimized. And so we've got to try to reverse that. And that isn't necessarily a very quick process. It does take time.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I know we've been speaking primarily to women right now with this book, but I wanted to ask you what are some of the main differences in metabolism between men and women that you can speak on?
Well, as an overall function, if we just look at cellular metabolism, there's really no different, right? So you're basically still you're trying to convert food into energy. Now, if we look about structure and biology, there's a difference. Like men have higher levels of testosterone, and so that's going to help with muscle building. That's going to help with weight maintenance. And because you have such a higher amount of testosterone, when you have more muscle mass, your metabolism is just going to be higher, right? More muscle mass is going to make you, and you're just bigger, right? So you're going to have bigger organs. So you will just metabolically utilize more energy, right? And women then have more estrogens. And so that's going to change their biology as far as how they utilize energy. And, that's like a whole nother caveat to go into. But ultimately, your body's on a cellular level, how they're actually producing energy is quite similar. But environmentally, the cells that are in your environment is different. And a lot of it is just your hormonal functions that is making that change, and obviously your structure and so forth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned keto and carnivore. What do you think of them? Because they're so everyone's talking about them.
Oh, the carnivore craze right now.
There's definitely a carnivore craze.
Yeah.
So talk about it, because, one of the things that I mentioned to you was we came from this world of pretty low carb.
Yeah.
And we were low carb for several years. We got pretty lean, but then I hit a crazy metabolic wall, where my hormones were trash. I wasn't sleeping good. I wasn't recovering. And I was just so low carb. We're very pro animal food, but what do you think about carnivore and keto? Give us Kate's professional opinion.
So, kind of like I said, I think that you can actually use them therapeutically, and I think that if you look at them in the studies they have on them, certainly short term, they actually show increase. They can help with diabetics, they can help with autoimmune issues, because literally they're removing all irritants from the GI, right? And so if you do that, you will see health improvements. And so for those reasons, yes, they can be utilized very well therapeutically. I think they're quite hard to follow long term. I think only, being that low carb or no carb for long periods of time, just on a social level, I think could be quite challenging. So to me, it's look, whatever dietary approach you do, it needs to be sustainable. So if you can only eat meat forever in the rest of your life, okay, there might be some downsides to that over time. We don't have any research long-term on these diets. So we don't know what, if you try to do them 10, 20, 30, 40 years, there's no cultures that are eating these diets and that we can study and go, look, they're doing that. And look how, how long they're living and so forth. Most cultures that are have long lives, they're primarily eating carbohydrates. They're not eating large amounts of meat or large amounts of fat. So we have to kind of take all that in consideration and go, but at the same time, I think some people, if they want to shift, if they want a massive amount of weight loss and they do one of those diets, it certainly can work. When you are done with that diet, you will be insulin resistant. So they will produce that. Now, you can probably shift it back, and I've worked with people coming off a carnivore, and I find that usually it's, especially with women, that, I've seen women do it successfully for 3 or 4 years, and then they just hit this wall, and all of a sudden the system doesn't work optimally. And so I've worked with people coming off carnivore, and when you start giving them carbohydrates initially, they will look pre-diabetic. If they put a CGM on them, they will have high blood sugars, 180, 200 plus.
Whoa.
And so it is temporary, and it will adjust. And usually what I find with those individuals, you actually have to, because they're on so much fat. So when you give them those carbohydrates, and we've heard of the Randall cycle, right? Now the Randall cycle is basically your body will choose to consume, the cells will either utilize carbohydrates or fat as fuel. What you have to remember is you have 37 trillion cells, so they're using different fuel sources at all times. They aren't all using carbohydrates. They're not all using fat. Some are using carbs, some are using fat, some are breaking down and utilizing protein. But when you have a significant amount of fat in your diet and you haven't been consuming carbs for a while, your body will have a very slow response to insulin. So that's why they show such high blood sugar level. That will change over time. And so what you normally have to do is lower their fat a lot so that their body can start becoming more sensitized to sugars again. And that could be in the 10 to 15% range. And then they'll start utilizing it properly again. And then they can start re-adding it back in. But it's an interesting process. Those are the people I do like having CGMs on them, because you can really see it. And as you get their carbs low, all of a sudden they flatten out, and their carb response becomes in a normal range. So not everybody, because some people actually are truly insulin resistant. Maybe they're not producing insulin at that time, or they have other things going on with them that are not be able to produce energy properly, or they have a high amount of endotoxin in their system, and that alone will inhibit the glucose oxidation, which will look like high blood sugar, right? So we know that diabetics have high amounts of endotoxin in their system. And that's why if you see people that go on keto that are diabetic and they remove all the fibers and their gut heals, they can reverse diabetes because they have a low level of endotoxin going on now, right? Just removing that poison, now they can utilize energy. Of course, there's no carbohydrates going in there either, but it can work to help heal their system and then try to re-add them back in. I think most people freak out though, because when they do try to add it back in, their blood sugar goes off the rails. And so it is a kind of slow and steady process.
Whoa. How does somebody get rid of endotoxin without having to go carnivore or keto? How do you get rid of those toxins?
So so we all probably have some low level of it, right? It's probably slightly in your GI, at least you do. So it comes in, your bacteria, so increased bacterial load will create that, right? And so obviously keeping your bacteria in check. So, there's this whole thought process, the good bacteria, the bad bacteria. I don't think it's that simplistic. I mean, you have 10 times the amount of gut microbe in your GI than you do cells. So what is that? 400 trillion bacterial, fungal, viral things in your GI system. So what you want to do is you don't want to feed that bacteria to a level that it's going to proliferate up into your small intestine, because I think that's where the problems start. And then that small intestine, when you get stressed, it permeates and stuff leak into your system. So decreasing stress load, right? So not trying to because when you become severely stressed, that happens. So decreasing that, and also consuming foods that don't tend to feed bacteria as much. And that's why it's easy to digest carbohydrates are recommended, because they are going to be digested very soon in your small intestine, right? So your small intestine, the first 10 inches is what's breaking down most of your food. So in the duodenum of your small intestine, that's where most of food is getting broken down, and also in your stomach. So, and then the second part is the jejunum, and that's where most of everything is going to get absorbed. And so if you have simple sugars, they're basically already broken down and they're already being absorbed. So there's very little left to feed the bacteria. And so that was one way to help reduce endotoxin. And so cleaning up someone's GI, so not eating hard to digest foods, right, which are a lot of raw vegetables because they don't break down, nuts and seeds and beans. Those, of course, are not going to break down very well. So those are all going to end up broken down later on in your GI tract. And then for some people, reducing starches for at least some time, because starch can be like potatoes, they can be a good food, but they tendency to feed bacteria more, and so they can produce a higher endotoxin load. So it all depends on if that person has a lot of GI problems. If they are severely constipated, then despite what your doctor is telling you to eat tons and tons of fiber, you would initially want to really reduce the fiber intake and take the load off of your digestive system. And that way you will reduce endotoxin load, and that alone will help somebody, again, feel better. So that is one way. You can also eat a carrot salad, right? A carrot is antibacterial, antimicrobial, antifungal, adding coconut oil and vinegar, all the same properties. That too can help reduce endotoxin load. Then there's supplements like Cascara sagrada that can reduce it. Activated charcoal can reduce endotoxin load. Even a good like Megaspore probiotic can also reduce endotoxin. That is one supplement that can work really well with people. But it wouldn't be my first thing I would try.
Wow.
Make sure you reduce the stress and load off your digestive system first. Because, and again, I'm not saying that fibrous food are bad. I'm just saying if you have a sluggish GI, putting a bunch of food in there that's super hard to digest isn't going to be ideal. Yeah. And again, your digestive system runs best in that parasympathetic state, which is the rest and digest. And then when you're in a sympathetic fight or flight stress state all the time, it immediately shuts your digestive system down. So your digestive system is one big long muscle. Your stomach is a musculature, your intestines have muscles. And if that's not being there's not a good blood supply there, then it's going to slow down. So resting, allowing your system to heal, and then optimizing energy production is all going to help the digestive system. But before you can actually fix that, you might just reduce the load on it. Again, reduce all the hard to digest foods and add a carrot salad or possibly some supplements. And those things can help fix it while you work on energy production.
Wow. It's so crazy because it's literally the opposite of what, the world says. Everyone's like,
Yes.
oh, if you're constipated, more fiber.
Yeah.
The first thing that if you do a typical weight loss program, the first thing that they're going to do is say, okay, let's track your macros. And then let's also track your fiber,
Yes.
How much, make sure you're getting plenty of fiber. And it's really, you're saying the opposite, which I have in my experience, you're right, because anytime that I was loading up on a ton of the Brussels sprouts, on the cauliflower, on the broccoli, my digestion was a wreck. I was gassy. I was uncomfortable. We used to do all of that.
Dude, it was
it was not cute.
No, I mean, we can just come straight out and say it. We would eat these, these nut cheeses and you're just our house was like a fart factory. And it was this is disgusting.
And
this
look
isn't
at you
normal.
guys stay together.
We did through it all, through the fart factory.
That's right.
Yeah,
Oh
and I should give some context, because if you look at a lot of the research, you can look at research and it'll go, the people that consume 30-40 grams of fiber a day have better longevity, lower chances of colon cancer. And that is true when you do compare it to a person that's probably eating a standard American diet, right? So there's always a good, better, best. And when they do a lot of this research, they're comparing it to people that are probably eating fast food and a lot of processed foods, right? And so if they go from that diet and then they eat whole foods with a ton of vegetables in it, and they're gonna have improvements, right? Yeah. That's absolutely correct. But you can probably get a better improvement. It depends on where you are in kind of your healing protocol. But if your GI system is certainly under functioning, right? And again, if those people, if they were eating a ton of calories and and all of a sudden you reduce the crap and add all these whole foods, again, improvement. But that person might get stuck at some point too, especially if they start going hardcore, eating less calories, and now it's just roughage. They usually find out they start to get really constipated again. And then they're just try to add in additional things, right? Now they're adding in Miralax and tons of water, right? And again, it can kind of help, but is it really fixing the system? No, they've kind of overshot it at this point. And now you have to go, all right, we need to energize the system. And how do we do that? We got to give your body fuel, right? We have to make sure it's available. Can you break it down, right? If you can't break your food down, you can have the best food possible, but it's not going to matter because you're not getting any of it, right? You're just eventually going to crap it out, or the bacteria will feed off it. They're going to eat it. and you don't get anything. So ultimately, you've got to be able to break it down and digest it.
So good.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about sugar and how it's been so demonized.
The
Because
S word.
yeah, because when I came upon your work and I was reading your book and my mind was being blown, I was in a place in my life where I wasn't eating any fruit.
Yeah.
Like I was like, if it was a blueberry, that was it. But I would not eat any fruit because it was sugar. And I was always
sugar.
told that sugar diets are not good for you, and everyone demonizes sugar. And
Well, fruit nowadays, it's literally viewed as like candy. It's like fruit is candy
in the health
you know.
world.
Yeah.
It's like don't eat that fruit, So and I think that there's a lot of different opinions on it, but I want to know yours because you are the researcher, you are the person who has written this book that has changed thousands of lives, probably more than that at this point, but I would just love to know, what do we need to know about sugar? What are we getting it wrong? And is sugar bad for you? Is it good for you? Like, what's the whole scoop on sugar?
Yeah, that is a hot topic in today's space. But I think you need to first remember like things. Okay, if you have too much water, you can die, right?
Yeah.
Is water bad? No. You can have too much oxygen and you can die. Is oxygen bad? Right? So we have an extremist viewpoint in our culture, right? If too much of something is bad, then zero is best. And that's not correct, right? The dose makes the poison. And again, sugar, all it is an easy to digest carbohydrate. White sugar is an easy to digest carbohydrate. For some people, and I'm going to give you an extreme kind of case, that have horrible digestion, they just cannot break down anything. Sugar is so easily processed. For those individuals, like adding a decent amount of white sugar into their diet can be quite helpful because sugar is broken down very early up in your intestine, up into that the first part of your intestine absorbed, and there's nothing left. There's nothing for your body to feed off of. There's no bacterial load, right? Nobody is getting overly fat just by eating spoonfuls of white sugar. Like, they're eating foods that contain sugar and fat and flour and a bunch of other things, right? And most of the foods that we think of as sweet, sugary foods, like a donut or breads or whatever, if you look at them calorically, they're predominantly fat and calorically, right? There's a lot of fat in these foods. And when you eat highly palatable, sugary, fatty foods, you tend to overeat and you consume excess calories. Mm-hmm. And excess calories are not good. You're going to store them as fat. And if you do it too much and too often, then there can be other metabolic problems. And a lot of these foods that people are consuming have high amounts of the vegetable oils or the polyunsaturated oils in there. So those alone are doing massive problems. But they're going in with sugar, right? And so everyone's like, well, they're sweet. It's the sugar, and everyone's getting fat because we're all eating more sugary foods. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're eating just too much. And you're eating them with all these other things like flour and additives and processed food and so forth. But if you look at sugar in this form as like a fruit, and we know that that has a good amount of nutrition in it, and it's hot, and it's easy to break down, right? You don't see fruitarians. They're not heavy. They're not diabetic. Yeah. And they're eating only fruit, right? Yeah. So if that was the case, then these people should be like 4,000 pounds and they're all diabetic. But that's not what's happening here. So the context needs to be given. And because, like I said, we are all about clickbait society right now. We see a little headline and then we think, sugar is killing us all. Sugar is creating diabetes and cancer and everything else. And there's no context with any of that, right? I could tell you that oxygen is, if you go in there and you overconsume and you take in too much oxygen, you will die. And right. And then we all going to stop breathing. It just doesn't make any sense. And so when we understand our physiology and go, the fuel source that our body prefers is glucose. It's the one that we utilize the fastest. And in times of stress, we want quick energy, and it's always going to be glucose. And so when you understand that, you're like, and sugar is basically glucose and fructose, and we basically break all that down into glucose. Is that really a bad thing? And it is not, but we need to eat it in the way that's always coming in with nutrition, because sugar in itself is highly metabolic, and it will make your body utilize more nutrients. So if you're eating a lot of just sugary foods with no nutrient, you can have problems because you've basically increased your body's ability to utilize fuel, and now you are eating a nutrient deficient diet, so you can see all those problems. But if you're eating things like fruits and then combining it, again, I don't believe in a fruitarian diet or just a 100% carbohydrate diet or a vegetarian diet. You should combine these with other foods, usually animal based, and with enough fat and protein to kind of help regulate your blood sugar, so you can get all the adequate nutrition in, and then supply your body with its best nutritional and energy source, right? And again, taking that into context, when people have been living a very stressful life or been on a low carb diet for a significant amount of time, they will not utilize glucose properly. And you have to understand it. So telling them just go eating a ton of fruit is not going to be a good option. You have to understand where your body is at and then how to move through that process slowly so that you don't have a negative reaction when you do introduce sugars into your diet.
Wow.
Mind blowing.
Yeah. And
I eat fruit now, by the way, and I love it. I eat lots of fruit in the right context and with the right pairings.
Well, and that's kind of leading right into it. That's what I wanted to ask you, is like to like SparkNotes version, because some people are not going to read your book. They're just, all the information's there.
They should.
Exactly, but they won't. So I wanted to ask you, like, what should we eat? Like, what should someone eat?
That is right. So you get in trouble when I say things because people just hear it and then they apply it. So it can be very individualized.
A loaded question there.
It is so loaded because what you eat will be dependent on your current situation.
Sure.
And now, if you are a healthy person and you're optimizing energy production, then your diet should be anywhere from 40 to 60% carbohydrates in the form of fruits, juices, dairy products, milk, root vegetables, cooked vegetables. Yeah, and you can have literally all the vegetables. If the body is healthy, you can have all those things. And your body should manage just right. But predominantly, I like those easy to digest carbohydrates, right? Because again, it's going to be a low level of stress on the system. And then animal proteins, organs, grass-fed meats, seafood, usually whitefish, all the shellfish, eggs, good sources of eggs, dairy products, broths, gelatin. Like that should be predominantly the most of your diet. Like whole foods, and with a focus on animal proteins and then easy to digest carbohydrates.
Well, it's like when I read your book, when I read your book, and when I say read, it's because I've read it multiple times. But when I read about the pairings, I think that was what was so helpful too. It's like understanding that having some bone broth with your steak, like those types of pairings can also help with digestion. And I think that's why if you're listening to this and you feel overwhelmed, I even love in the back of your book, you have examples of what a full day could look like of eating and what you can make for your breakfast and what you can make for lunch and what you can have for a bedtime snack. And I think that's so applicable to the everyday person because I think so many people are overwhelmed with the like, what's my shopping list, right? Like, what am I going to go to the grocery store and buy? And what you're saying is Whole Foods is really what's on the cover of your book. It's you see a glass of milk, you see a block of cheese, like it's all on the cover. And it is just whole real foods and having complete meals. It's making sure that you have a complete meal when you sit down for dinner, and you sit down for dinner, and you have it with your family. And I think those are some of the things too that I have learned so much about my journey because I've had such a long, extensive journey with being very unhealthy and having a really dysfunctional relationship with food, is that it's not even only just about what's on your plate. It's also how you're eating it. It's the energy that you're in. It's the stress management that you're tackling. Because I think, everyone just wants to know what's my list of foods I need to go buy at the store. But it's like, that's not the full picture. Yeah. And there's so much more to it than just that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a very good point because I always say, look, your nutrition is like 30%. I mean, it's a big part and it integrates into the other parts because if you have good nutrition, you're going to sleep better, right? Good sleep is a huge part of the equation. And so if you sleep like crap, then people don't feel as well the next day and they tend to make poor food choices, right? Then we don't have enough energy to prepare our food or actually have a bandwidth to kind of think about what we need to eat that day. And then another part is, how you feel about yourself and your thoughts and what you're saying to yourself. And then like the environment you're putting yourself in. And that can be where you live, your relationships, your job. right? If you live in a shit show every day, you don't like your spouse, you hate your job, right? And you live in a place that just makes you miserable. Well, I can give you the best of diet. It's certainly going to help, but there might be other changes you need to make. But what we have to understand is all of these things overlap each other, and they're all going to affect each other. And so for some people, they can work in different spaces, right? Some people literally do not have the bandwidth to go and look at that. I'm like, how do I make a food plan, right? What do I do right now? And so my question to them is like, what is it that you have? What can you handle right now? Like, how many things can we do? Can you get up and walk outside in the morning and put your feet on the ground and look at the sun and get some sun every day? Can you do that? And then, and I'm like, okay, good. Now we're just going to, now in the morning, I'm going to have you wake up and I'm going to have 6 ounces of juice and an egg. Okay, that's what we're going to do for the next 2 weeks. Wow. And then what happens is that person will feel 10% better. So then we have more space. And now we're like ready to make another decision. So when you get into this work, this is not about doing all the things at one time, right? Yeah. Don't do that. You'll overwhelm yourself, and that's not about healing, right? If you were going to go run a marathon, you don't go and run 26 miles tomorrow. You go run a half a mile tomorrow. Cool. And as you run that a few times, then your body adapts, and now you can go run a mile and then 2. And think of this process the same way. You need to go, all right, I'm going to pick 3 things I think I can do from this, and then wrap your head around that and do them consistently. And then in a week or 2, make another change. And if you feel like you need assistance or a guide, then go hire somebody, right? If you can't afford that, then read the book, follow myself on social media, and at least, again, pick a handful of things that you think that you can wrap your head around to change, and do it slow and steady. Thousands of people have done this by themselves, but they've been consistent and they've put the energy in to what they could do and slowly made changes. And that's going to be the process, right? This is not don't go A to Z. This is A to B to C kind of situation.
So good.
So good. So on that note, I think my final question for someone who's listening right now, and they're like, okay, you've just broken my whole mindset and worldview around 100 different things. What is the number one thing that they can go do today and see a change, over the next few weeks? Is it start with the nutrition? Should they start with just their mindset? Should they just get their feet in the ground in the morning? I mean, there's so many things I know, but if there was one thing you could tell someone to just, and I mean, I would just say, go get the book. Like, I was just like, go buy the damn book. Because I think it's so digestible. And I think that's another thing too, that a lot of people in the nutrition space do, is they make it so complicated. And when I read your book, I was like, this is easy to understand. This is simple. Like, it's so simplified, but it's also very in depth. And there's so much, you go to the back of the book and it's like, here's all the research that was done to put this piece of work together. So, but for the overwhelmed person who is living a very busy, stressed life right now, but so desperately wants to see a change in their life, and they want to feel sick, and they're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. What is one thing that you would start them off with? Or if you have a couple, that's fine too, but maybe the top thing.
Yeah, right. Again, usually it's all dependent on that individual, right? And kind of what they're doing, right? Because some people might be eating breakfast and not doing 20 other things, right? So when I work with someone, I'll look at a lot of different things. But the one thing nutritionally I'll look at is, are you eating breakfast and what does it look like? And because your breakfast is going to set your day. If you're waking up and skipping your meal, like, you're already putting your body in a stress space. And so your tendency is you're probably going to be more reactive in your day than if you had enough fuel to just start and manage it. So I would look at their breakfast and go, what are you eating? And I usually like to, if they're eating nothing, then I go, well, we're going to start with 200 calories, right? And then maybe 30 to 40% of that might be protein, maybe 30 to 40% might be carbs, and a little bit of fat. But if they're eating breakfast and it's like 100% carbohydrates, or it's crap, like a bowl of cereal, then I'd be like, all right, let's get something more substantial. And preferably, I like to see people eat around 25 to 30 grams if they're a female, maybe a little bit more if they're a male. And then, maybe anywhere from 30 to 70 to 80 grams of carbohydrates, depending on where they're coming from. Because if I can get you feeling more stable to start your day, then I know that you're going to probably make better choices the rest of the day, right? And then usually I like to front load people's calories. So look, most people are not eating enough during the day, and then they get home and then they eat everything. And right? You got to think about this. You need fuel during the day. So we need to get you eating during the day. And so if you're not hungry, then we need to give you some small meals to kind of like get things going to kind of keep you fueled, because it's one thing I see with people when they start eating more through the day and the right foods, right? Again, some of them that I suggested, all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I feel better at night. I don't feel like I need to drink a bottle of wine when I get home. I feel more stable. I don't feel like I need to eat everything in sight when I get home. And what I love about this is you have to stop. I could stop using things like willpower and pure will and strength to get through the day and not eat crappy at night. Because once you fuel your system and support it, it's like, yeah, we're good. We don't need these things, right? We don't need to go and eat that thing of ice cream, the whole pint. And I'm all about ice cream, but eating a pint or 2 pints at bedtime is probably not going to be ideal for you. So eat a good breakfast, good amount of protein, good amount of carbohydrates, start your day off and start there, and then kind of work yourself through the process from there.
It's so good. And I just want to say the ice cream thing, okay? Like, I spent so many years not eating ice cream, or we would get the we were like getting the frozen yogurt that had like 1,000 different disgusting ingredients in it because it was vegan and because whatever, and it was low this and low that, and it was just tasted terrible. And it's like, I want to say to that, like, I can sit down and I can have a little bit of ice cream almost every single night, and I never overindulge. I never feel like I'm like, oh my gosh, ravenous crazy. And I just have, and sometimes I even leave some in my bowl because I'm like, no, I've had enough. Like, I'm good. Like, and that is not willpower. That is literally just me feeling safe in my body. Yes. And that is something that as a woman who is 34 years old, who for the most majority of my life dieted since I was like 12, to have that type of food freedom and not to feel stressed about eating some ice cream and then like getting in a bathing suit the next day, like, I don't care. It is so worth doing this work. And so for anyone who is listening and you just feel overwhelmed, because it is overwhelming, it just feels like you have to change your whole life and you have to just, become a different person overnight. Just give yourself the opportunity to take the first step, and you'll get there. Yes. I mean, it didn't happen for us overnight, but it is so worth it. And to just have the freedom that we have today with food. And I think that's what you give so many people is food freedom, is like freedom to just be able to enjoy life without having so much stress around what should I eat? What am I eating? I can't eat that. I can't eat this. And it just takes us all back to the basics of what nourishes our bodies, what makes our bodies feel safe and helps us thrive. And it's truly like, it is the work, Kate. You're doing the work for so many. So we appreciate you so much. How can our listeners find you? Where can they follow you?
You can find me on Instagram or Facebook at Kate Deering Fitness, or you can go to my website at katedeering.com, and I have tons of podcasts. I'll have your podcasts on there. And of course, you can get my book, How to Heal Your Metabolism. That's on Amazon. And I'm in the process of writing another one right now.
Whoa!
And writing a book is like having a baby, right? You do it, and you'll probably have the baby, like, I'm never doing that again. And that's, I think, what I felt when I did it, the first one. And then you forget. And then you're like, I should write another book. And then you're doing it, and you're like, oh, yeah, now I remember what this was like. Because I think there's more to say, and I think there's more context to give. And I'm kind of trying to write it in a different fashion with some of the same principles, but helping people understand it deeper. Because I really believe when we understand our physiology better, and in a way that people can digest it, right? That makes it easier for them. Then it's easier for them to make the choices. Like, information is power if you know what to do with it. If you're just trying to look at things like, well, what should I eat? Without an understanding of why, that you don't tend to make the right choices all the time. But when you really understand the depths of how your system is functioning, and then you're going, that's why I'm going to choose this. And this is why the decision making makes so much easier. That then I just want people to have more power with their food choices. And so that's why I decided to write this, because it's kind of like the first 2 or 3 sessions I have with someone is like this book. Do you have a release date, or is it like you're just in it right now? I'm just in it because it's what happened the last time was, as I write it, I'm like, I need to say this too. I need to give more context here. I need to give more. And because the other book was supposed to be like 150 pages and it is 400 pages. And so I was like, I'm going to write a short book. And then now I'm in it. I'm like, this is growing again. So We'll see. I want to be done with like the first draft by the end of the year, but we'll see. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
excited.
excited
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
It's going to be so juicy. Whenever it comes out, I'll be the first to get it and get me on your pre-launch list. Like, I can't wait. That's so exciting. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for sharing with our audience. I know it's going to be so impactful for so many. So
Yes.
we are grateful for you.
Yes, we appreciate you.
Thanks, guys. It's so great to finally meet you and have this chat.